Alright, what's up guys, it's Zero here, and today we're here with our usual monthly tier list. So, as of recording, the day 2 of CS ended a day ago, or more or less a day ago. So we have data from that to pull from as well. That's why I waited so long for this month, because I wanted to look at that as well. And this month we had quite a bit. We had the entirety of set 2, we had 2 clan events, and we also had a bunch of nerfs to some of the more dominant decks. So lots of things to go over, quite a big shift in the meta, I'd say, comparing from last month. So time to go over everything. So I'll just do what I usually do. I'll just slap stuff on, usually the old stuff first, and then go more in depth about the stuff I actually want to talk about, the newer stuff. Also, if you've noticed, I got rid of a bunch of decks that I just don't think are good. Main things are like Seekers, Liberators, both versions of Link Joker. I just kind of took all those off. I didn't think those decks are very relevant, and also don't really care to talk about them because I don't think they're very good. So if you're wondering when those are gone just because I don't think they're good. So I just don't know. They just go into the everything else tier. So yeah, no point talking about this in my opinion. So let's get on with the tier list. So we'll start with the older stuff first, the stuff that I don't have as much to talk about. So Sook did have a showing in the CS as I think it was Battle Domes, one of his decks. Sook, they did get strides and stuff, so not like it's unplayable, but again, heal guards screw Tom over, so not the best. I just have it here for the sake of having it here. This can honestly go anywhere. I don't think it's particularly amazing or anything. It can be anywhere from like middle of the road here to it can even be thrown down here, to be honest. So yeah. There's that. Revengers are also here. The deck is still solid, just no stride support. But we are getting it next month, so just expect this deck to shoot back up here with actual strides and stuff. So for now, it's here. But I expect this to move up next month. I'm not gonna do anything about this. You know why they're here. You know why they're good. So nothing changed about them. So yeah. Let's see. We will also talk about witches. So this deck again had a really good show in the last CS. I still don't think this deck is particularly good or anything. To me, this deck is discount duos. That is how I look at it. Discount duos with a bit of pushing power. Good. It's pretty good at rushing just because the starlets are scaled and stuff. But I don't think this deck's particularly like good or anything. I don't think it's like bad or anything either, alright? But I think it's ranges again, like, so it ranges from anywhere from like here to like tail end of here. I don't think it's particularly good or anything, so I just drop it here for now. I do think this could be down here, same with this. Honestly, I'll just move these down here for now, because I actually don't think these decks are particularly that good. I definitely wouldn't play them in any tournaments or anything like that. So yeah. Next up, we'll talk about good old Imperial Daughter. So I only have this here because I didn't want people to ask about it, but it's here. This deck is definitely here. It is a very funny joke of a deck. It's very funny that the deck has come back up with resurgence with the strides, but it's honestly not that good. It's just kind of here. It's funny. It's kind of annoying, but I wouldn't call it good or anything. The deck definitely has a bunch of counters to it. Decks that can just have boosters that scale their rears up, like something like Blademaster. If you give them the board retired, they can scale their 6Ks to get power retired, stuff like that. Gunners just screw you over completely. Aquaforce, something like Aquaforce, they'll just use Basilodea to poke you for the 1 first. Poke you for the 1, kill off your rears, and then their Vanguard is like 30k anyway, so you're still taking 2 damage from that. So it's honestly not that good. It's just kind of there. So yeah. Let's talk about the older. I'll leave the newer decks for now. So older decks, Chronojet. I think this is the definition of a tier 2 deck. It has everything it needs to be a good usable deck, but it doesn't have anything that pushes it over the top to make it like super good. It's a very fair and balanced deck. The only thing that this deck will do is rob you with Mystery Flare. Otherwise, this deck plays a very, very honest game. It's like it controls your board. It can push damage for a bit. Has relatively good strides as well, I'd say. Fate Rider is really good. Ragnarok is an okay way to finish the game. Mystery Flare can rob games. Chronos Command can bot entire board. The deck has a very good toolboxy like G-Zone. But overall, the deck's a little too fair. I would say that the best thing about this deck is that it basically is playing old Vanguard 0 where there's no heal guards and stuff, because this deck essentially only has to interact with PGs instead of heal guards as well, because they have a bunch of cards that just say your opponent can't guard grid zeros with the Ishin, the Resist Intercept, the Mate to the Legion, and the Ragnarok. So I think that's the thing that's going for this deck, is that it has a very good toolboxy G-Zone, and it also has a bunch of ways help you just ignore heal cards completely. So that's why it's here, but I definitely don't think it's anywhere near tier 1 or anything. I think this is very much the definition of a tier 2 deck. And then going back to stuff from last set, Mr. Altmile, I think this also belongs here. This can be whatever build Altmile you think. I personally think Jewel Knight Altmile is the best way to play the deck, so we'll just keep this as that. This deck is really good at pushing damage. This deck can scale lanes relatively well, but the biggest issue with this deck is this deck cannot end games when the opponent's at 5 to save their life. If your opponent's at 11 setup, you get at most 2 checks, and that is horrendous. Like, yes, the deck is really good at pushing to 5, but once your opponent is at 5, you have like Twin Swords basically your only way to end games if you're not playing like Blaster Spirits or Blaster Blade or whatever like that. So I think that is the biggest issue with this deck. This deck is also horrendous going first. This deck like cannot win going first for the most, basically at all, because this deck needs to get hit first stride to push any damage at all. And if you're going first, you can't stride when you go first on your first stride, right? So yeah, that's why I think this deck is. I think this is also very middle of the road. If you go second, you could steamroll someone, but I think there are much better decks for the purposes of steamroll going second, and I think Altmile is not that deck. So that's why I'm putting this here. Victor, I think Victor is also just another case of this, where you can steamroll going second. It's horrendous going first. It's good at pushing damage, and this deck also shares the same issue with Altmile, where once your opponent's at 5, you struggle to end games. This deck is a little better at it just because the Victor Plasma is a resetting Vanguard, so like your lanes are actually like big, so you actually force out PGs instead of heal cards. So I'd say these are around the same place. They both suck at ending games, but they're both really good pushing at 5. They're both good at going second, but let's be real, what deck isn't good at going second? So I definitely think these two decks are like around the same place. I'll just put Altmile ahead of this just because this deck actually had a showing in the CS on day 2, unlike Victor. Yeah, so I'll just leave this behind there for now. And then another old decks, we will have, I'll talk about the nerf decks later, so the only set 1 deck that's left here is Blademaster. I do actually think Blademaster has gone up to tier 1. I really shat on it last month, but that was because the cross existed, alright? And since the cross got nerfed, the next best thing in line is Blademaster, so definitely goes up. It definitely is very good because if you look at like stuff like this, these decks need board to play the game. Blademaster says they're not allowed to have a board. A lot of decks right now actually need a board to actually do their stuff, and Blademaster is really good at controlling the game state like that. So I do think it does have a good place in that just because it is the premier board control deck. Very stable too. Has a bunch of ways to deal with resist intercepts as well, unlike something like Vanquisher, because you can play you can play the Great, or in my opinion, the better option is the original Dragonic Overlord, the CB3 clear front row. So I think this deck has I think this is a very, very solid all-around deck that just isn't bad in any particular way, but isn't like super good in other ways either. So I think this is it's a very good middle of the road deck, but it does everything super well. So in a way it's kind of like a better Chronojet kind of thing, because it's just an overall more well-rounded deck. So that's why I do think it belongs to be up here. So yeah, I think it's just a really well-rounded deck that's really good at doing like a bunch of stuff. Obviously, still Dragon Clan, so you still can't draw to save your life, but this deck generates enough advantage off your draw triggers once you see them that you can play the game good enough. So yeah, so I do think Blademaster does deserve to be tier 1. I do think it's the current best Kagero deck right now. So spoilers, I don't think the cross is as good as Blademaster. And then I guess we'll talk about the nerfed decks now. Just move it like that. Talk about the nerf decks first. So duos, I do think duos probably do still deserve to be somewhere in tier 1. Where you want to put it between these two, I don't think it's that big of a difference. Duos are probably a little better than Blademaster. The deck they lost to Kura, but from what I've seen people doing the CS, they basically don't Legion at all until they need to dupe their stuff to survive. Because all I've seen people do is they ride the Nemule and just stride on top of it like every single turn. And then once they actually need to dupe their PGs and stuff to live, they Legion to dupe and then just play like a slow game from there. Because Bermuda did get a bunch of good two good generic strides, the Somni and the Olivia. Somni being an on hit bounce to call and give power, so basically like an extra attack for a fourth attack. And Somni, not Somni, the Olivia is the same thing, except it's not on hit, and it gets a crit as well. So the deck does have ways to actually kill the opponent now, and having strides help you push damage is also really nice. So despite getting nerfed, I think the G zone more than makes up for the Kuro nerf. So like you're not just playing like degenerate ass sit there stall forever deck. You actually have ways to push the opponent now. So so I do think this deck does belong to be up here. I think Brawlers are complete garbage now. They have lost so many things that made the deck good before. They have lost the thing. The Buster lost its draw off of its skill, so you no longer break even with the skill. You are actually negging one, and with the Rising Phoenix being on a restriction list with the Big Bad Knuckle Dragon, you not only lost your like only source of plussing, you also lost your Soul Blast out to help you fuel drop zone up for Legion. So I think this deck lost way too much to be a contender for good. I honestly think this deck is at best tail end of here. Realistically speaking, I think it's here. I do think it's here, and it also doesn't help the fact that you have another Narukami deck that's just better than it now. So yeah, so it's not even like you have no other competition. The Vanguard is just a better deck than Brawl. So I think it is either tail end of here or like somewhere in here. So I'm just gonna leave this here. I really don't think this deck is good anymore. And finally, the Cross. This deck did have a very big showing in the CS. However, I don't think this deck is good. I think this deck is so mediocre now. You basically have like one big turn of using like Dote to like draw a bunch of cards and stuff. But like at this point, if you're playing the Cross, just play Blademaster. Like both decks rely heavily on their G zone, but Blademaster gives you an extra retire every turn. You also don't have to ever choose between Legioning or Striding to do stuff. So yeah, I just don't think this deck is, I don't think it's unplayable or anything, right? I don't think it's I don't think it actually got gutted nearly as bad as Brawlers did. I do think this deck is like high tier 2, maybe on the verge of like bottom of tier 1, but I really don't think this deck is good anymore. I don't think you should be playing this deck. If you have the rich man's G zone to play the Cross properly, because this deck is actually super reliant on the G zone. You actually need like 7 GRs for this deck to function, to actually win games now, post nerf. So if you have the G zone to play post nerf the Cross, at that point just play Blademaster. I think this deck is just better than the Cross. So I think it's like a high tier 2 deck at best. I don't think it's anywhere near tier 1. Also, it doesn't help that Vanquisher just completely dicks on it because of the fact that this deck is Legion reliant. So if you end up losing all your heals or all your pieces, i.e. your Dotes, and your Dotes and heals get banished, like you're basically not playing the Cross at all. At that point, you might as well have just been playing Blademaster. So yeah, a variety of things. Nerfs, a horrendous matchup against Vanquisher, and just not having that incredibly high ceiling on that grind game anymore that it used to have makes me not want to put this anywhere higher than high tier 2. And speaking of Vanquisher, I also think this deck belongs in higher tier 2. I don't think this deck is tier 1. This deck's biggest issue is that it cannot deal with resist at all whatsoever. The only way this deck is dealing with resist is riding Vermilion or Crimson, and in a deck that isn't focused around Vermilion or Crimson, you are not scaling your rear lane at all whatsoever. So if they're not at 5, that's super unreliable. But overall, I think this deck does have the tools needed to be a good deck. It's just that resist is something that this deck just cannot deal with. Like, this deck gets stomped so hard by Bermuda, it's not even funny. Because Bermuda can constantly put out like double resist front row, meaning you're not playing the game at all for like 2 turns, and that slows you down so hard. I also think overall this deck is just a worse Blademaster in my opinion, just because like Blademaster has access to Root Flare and just easier retire on everything, better selective retire, because fun fact, Zoraz is a random retire back to back row. Random retire prior to back row, meaning if your opponent has a anti-retire starter, you could just not be retiring anything with Zoraz. So yeah, but this deck does have the niche of being a deck that shuts down any deck that needs its drop zone, i.e. Legion decks, or decks that recycle stuff from the drop zone, i.e. stuff like Alt Mile and Asha. So I think the best way to describe this deck is that it's a Gatekeeper deck. If you can't deal with Vanquisher, you're probably not going to be that good of a deck, just because of the fact that Vanquisher exists. So yeah, so overall Vanquisher, it's a fine deck. Loses really hard to resist, but is the Gatekeeper deck to stop decks that need their drop zone, need to recycle stuff in their drop zone, to stop them from playing the game. So it has a place in the meta just because of that. So That's why I think Vanguard is probably the top of tier 2. And then finally, the newer decks. I'll go over Asha first. I think Asha is like the tail end of tier 2. I think you can even put this here, to be honest. Overall, I think Asha has exactly one niche. All right, Jingle Flower is a good stride against all the combo decks like Aqua Force and Bermuda, or decks that don't have to retire. So this deck is good against those matchups in specific, but against everything else, this deck just feels like shit to play. Like doesn't have push power, doesn't have retire. Your columns get really big, but big like 50k power lanes doesn't matter when you're running them to 9k and up. So I really don't think this deck is particularly good. It has the niche of being good against Bermuda and Aquaforce, so it is fine to play in something like Tournament as like your third pick of a deck, but aside from that, I would not play this deck at all. Same goes for Musketeers with strides, like the guy who got second in CS. I think he got pretty fucking lucky, to be honest, but that's besides the point. I don't think Neonectar is good. The strides do not carry this clan enough to put it anywhere higher than this. At best, I'd put it here, at the very tail end of here, but aside from that, I think it is, honestly, I think it is just whatever. And then finally, we have the last three decks. Loris. I think Loris belongs in tier 2. I don't think it's a tier 1 deck. I think Loris goes probably somewhere here. Yeah, probably somewhere here. Loris' stride bonus is mediocre as hell. It's CB1 bounce a card to draw a card. So basically, it reads CB1 draw a card, which is like, it's fine, it's not terrible, it's whatever. But this deck makes heavy use of its strides, but at that point, if you're playing a deck that makes heavy use of its strides, you might as well just play Duos or Mirror. Because Duos have that ability to just not die at the end of the game with the strides, and Mirror just has a higher kill ceiling with the Mirror combo instead of having to rely on Olivia for everything. So Loris is in that weird place where it's not as defensive as Duos, and it doesn't kill as well as Mirror. So it's in that really awkward spot where it's like it flows slightly better in the middle early game because the Loris stride bonus skill will always give you an extra card if you need it. But for one, it costs a counterblast, and two, it just isn't that impactful. So I think it's a combination of, I think this is more of just you have like two better Bermuda decks to play. Why are you playing Loris? The best thing Loris is used for is being the one of in these two decks, so you have a searchable ride if you need it. So yeah. And then finally, we have the last two decks. I'll talk about Mirror first. This is personally my favorite deck of the set. I personally do love this deck, playing with my sister, right? But yeah, I think it belongs somewhere here. I think it's relatively tied with Duos. I think both decks are good. I don't think one's particularly better than the other or anything. I think they're both around the same. One deck kills better, one deck has more defensive options. Duos did perform better than Mirror results-wise, so I'll just put this here. But I personally think Mirror is better. But so I'll put it up here. But I personally think Mirror is better. But I think these two are very interchangeable within the spot. So I'll just leave it like this because results. But what Mirror does, Mirror, like I said before, Mirror is Loris with a higher ceiling because you use strides to push damage. You use strides to just like you can use strides to endgame, but the thing is, the Mirror combo is just more checks than anything Loris could do, or it by itself. So yeah, it just has a really good, really good kill combo. So this is the best. This is currently the best deck that sits on Break Ride, pushes with strides, and then ends game with the Break Ride combo. But since the Bermuda strides are so good, you can a lot of games. I don't even like kill with Mirror a lot of things. The Mirror combo is very resource intensive. So a lot of times I just end up striding the higher, it's just Loris with the higher ceiling basically. So I think that's why I think it's better than Loris in every way, and I think why it belongs here, because your kill combo is very insane. Your kill combo, if they don't double intercept, is basically guaranteed lethal. Otherwise, it's like 4 or 5 checks, which is really good. And finally, we have Aqua Force, which I currently think is probably the best deck right now. I will say, I don't think any of the decks in Tier 1 are particularly broken or anything. I think everything in Tier 1 and Tier 2 can relatively compete. But the reason why I think Aqua Force is the best deck right now is because this deck, going second, will just run your face in. Aqua Force is by far the best go second win game deck. If this deck goes second, you are probably eating shit, because they get first stride, they'll push you with first stride, and then when you do your first stride, you push them, and then on Your second stride, you die to Lambros, which is yeah. So this deck, there's no other way to start. This is the best go second deck in the game right now, and every deck wants to go second. And if you're the best at going second, you're probably the best deck, right? So there's that. It's basically just that. This deck is really good going second. Tidal Bore, pretty good first strike for this deck too. Just draws you a card and can let you push if you want to. But the combination of the Algos plus the Tactic Sailor, if you land that as your 4th attack column, you can draw 2 off that, meaning that even if they kill off that column or kill off your board, you still broke even on card advantage to play down for next turn. So I think this deck, it draws a bunch of cards. Your first stride is pretty good. Your kill stride is really good in the Lambros. So it just has everything it needs to be a good deck right now. I do think this deck's going to completely fall off next month. Just because of what's in the next set. Link Joker. We already seen Gurguit skill. 21k Vanguard lol. What's Blademaster doing? So I do think this deck will fall off next month, but at the current moment, I think it is the best deck right now. Results show as well. I think, if I remember correctly, on the CS on day 2, everyone banned it except for one time, and the one time it got to play, it won. So technically a 100% win rate in CS, as far as we know, because we didn't see everything in round 1, but it was banned the most for a reason, because no one wants to play against this deck. You don't want them to go second and then just win the game because they went second. So yeah, that's it for this month's tier list. Relatively good meta, I'd say. It's like everything is around the same power level, nothing too fucking broken or anything like that. But overall, it's like, I'm personally not a big fan of these metas where everything is around the same power level. I personally like having like 1 or 2 standout decks, but that's just me. So yeah, that's it for this video. Like, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.